Welcome to Never Too Late for Fitness Radio, bringing baby boomers proven strategies and innovative products for getting fit, staying fit, so you can live a longer, healthier, and happier life. Here's your host, best-selling author and fitness advocate, Phil Ferriss.
This is Phil Ferriss, and welcome to our show. Never Too Late for Fitness Radio provides answers and straight talk about fitness, nutrition, and healthy lifestyles for people over 50. Our goal is to educate and navigate health and fitness strategies that help you live a longer, healthier, and happier life. On some shows, we feature everyday people like you and me who have acted and reclaimed their health and fitness. We all love a success story, especially if the person's facing the same challenges we are. Hearing real success stories helps inform, motivate, and inspire us to live a healthier life. On other shows, like today's, we focus on organizations and industry professionals who share how they help their clients who are 50 plus achieve their health and fitness goals. Usually we talk about physical fitness on this show, but today we're going to talk about and focus on mental fitness and strategies for preserving your memory. Today's guest is Marvin Berman, Ph.D, C.B.T, founder and president of QuietMIND Foundation. Dr. Berman earned his master's and Ph.D. in Psychoeducational Processes from Temple University, where he studied group and organizational behavior. He obtained certification in Bioenergetic Analysis at the Philadelphia Institute of Bioenergetic Analysis in 1983. He has participated in postgraduate training workshops and seminars in neuropsychology, systems-centered therapy, and Feldenkrais Method. He was certified in EEG Biofeedback in 2003. Dr. Berman currently consults to senior executives and management teams on the application of cognitive neuroscience in leadership development and performance. But he has taken a leadership role in expanding the application of EEG biofeedback and related technologies into the treatment of neuropsychological and neurodegenerative disorders. So, Marvin, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Phil. Thanks for having me.
Now, the QuietMIND Foundation mission is to study, provide, and promote drug-free, low-cost, non-invasive approaches to understanding and treating disorders that affect a person's thinking, behavior, and movement. Can you share with us why you started this foundation and the type of work you're doing?
Well, sure. And again, thanks for having me. We're a nonprofit research and training group in the outside suburbs of Philadelphia, and we've been doing this since about 2000. And what we started doing was something called biofeedback, and specifically brainwave biofeedback, which is a technology that's been around actually since the 60s, where we can measure brainwave electrical activity using sensors that sit on your scalp, and we can then compare those electrical readings to norms for people by age, gender, and whether you're left or right-handed. And we started to see that there were very specific patterns of activity in people with different kinds of physical and psychological disorders, but also people in terms of their getting older and seeing that their memory and other cognitive functions were starting to decline, and that we could then track those patterns of activity in their brainwave activity and see how it corresponded to their memory functions. Well, that got me looking at the evidence in neurology about dementia, and I found that there were many studies showing that the neurologists had been measuring brainwave activity and correlating it with people developing dementia for years. And there was a very solid body of evidence showing that as people progressed from mild cognitive impairment through, say, severe dementia, there was a very predictable pattern of activity in the EEG. And specifically, it was that slow brainwaves amplitudes, the actual voltage would go up, and the faster brainwave activity, the voltage would go down. Well, when we saw that, I then looked in the literature for, so what did the neurologists do to use biofeedback training to modify that pattern of activity? And I found that no one had ever done anything. All they kept doing was the same thing over and over again. So we set about doing a clinical trial of brainwave biofeedback training for people with age-related memory disorder where they'd been diagnosed with dementia. And we had people coming to the clinic getting this kind of training. And we also had people doing it with their loved ones, the caregivers doing it with people at home themselves. And we showed that when you trained people to decrease the amplitude of the slow waves and increase the amplitude of the fast waves, that in fact they performed better on a whole battery of neuropsychological testing. So that really made us take a second look at what's going on in neurology and go, well, maybe they're not paying attention because all of the research on neurofeedback and biofeedback is being published in journals that they probably never read. And then we realized that the biofeedback journals had been publishing data about the use of biofeedback for treating seizure disorders like epilepsy for over 40 years. And that it became clear that the neurologists didn't know that really the first line treatment for seizure disorders isn't giving people medication, because that's way more invasive than doing biofeedback. But because they didn't know the data was there, they didn't realize that the first line treatment for seizure disorders would be biofeedback training. So it all became clear that there needs to be a cross-pollination of these different areas to get people aware that there are technologies available for treating neurological disorders that don't involve medications, or at least there are things you can do before you have to take medication that might very well help your symptoms significantly.
And that's in medicine today and healthcare today. A lot of it is breaking down the silos of the specialists and the different groups. Understand you train the whole person and look at things in different ways.
And that's basically because of my training in organizational behavior. I was very aware of this idea of silos of learning and silos of knowledge, and how we need to create cross-disciplinary teams in order to increase the functionality of an organization in terms of increasing productivity and enhancing innovation.
Okay. Now, to help give this, because a lot of this is based on biofeedback and neurofeedback, maybe you can give us people probably have heard about it, but may not know exactly how it works. Can you give us an understanding of what it is, so they really understand what you're talking about, how you're able to?
Yeah, I mean, it's basically, the whole idea is rooted in the concept of reward conditioning. So if you reward a certain kind of behavior, you tend to see that behavior being repeated more frequently because it's been rewarded. So the two basic laws in psychology are that behavior that's rewarded tends to be repeated, and behavior that's not rewarded tends not to be repeated. So what biofeedback is based on, and neurofeedback is simply the application of biofeedback training principles, but using neurological or EEG activity. If we were talking about skin temperature and training people to increase or decrease their skin temperature, then you would call that thermal biofeedback. So it's just biofeedback's the umbrella term, and then you can break it down by what particular physiological function you're actually training. But the point here is that when you do a process of reward conditioning of EEG activity, essentially what you're doing is collecting data by using some surface electrodes that you put on your head, or you hook them onto your ears or behind your ears on the mastoid bone, and you record the electrical activity that's coming from your brain, and you represent that on a computer screen in some way that makes it apparent to the person what they're doing and what's going on. So what we've done is have the screen show a green dot. And the green dot will appear or disappear based on whether the person is producing the desired amount of brainwave activity that we've established based on our assessment. So the more they see the green dot or hear a guitar play or a piano play, they then know that they're going in the desired direction. And so their brain becomes attached or attracted to the activity, whatever it was, that produced seeing the green dot and listening to the music. And when you do that over and over and over a period of time, your brain then learns that particular pattern of activity and continues to reproduce it because it produces a more desirable level of activity in the brain and in the body.
And so this is like, I have brain activities going on, and I may not be aware of what those brain activities are until nobody is. And then all of a sudden, through the neurofeedback, I start to see some changes, and you can see some changes in patterns. And I'm basically being trained to redirect those brain waves in a way that's more conducive to the behavior or thought process that I want. Is that
exactly? So, for example, a man who I was working with the other day who had some learning disabilities and some performance anxiety, and he's a physical therapist, and he's got a great deal of experience with physical therapy and the body, working with the body. And I was training him using the neurofeedback, and at some point he saw that his performance was going down. And I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Well, I'm really trying to figure out how to keep the green dot on the screen." And I said, "Well, are you noticing that the more you try to figure it out, the worse you're doing?" He went, "Oh, I see." And I said, "Yeah, stop trying and see what happens." And when he did that, his performance dramatically improved. So that it became clear that there's a level of functioning that's below the surface of willful conscious activity, willful consciousness, that really does have something to do with how we function. And that just willfully trying to make something happen may actually create more tension and therefore decrease your brain's ability to function effectively.
Okay, and that's often true in like I coach sports, and when kids are really trying and mentally, they tend to tense up and not do as well. And you say, have fun, be in the flow, be in the moment of the game, and they perform a lot better. It's when they really start thinking about, I got to switch to my opposite hand when I'm playing lacrosse. And when I think about it, I don't do it well.
Exactly. So that's exactly it. Well, the other piece that I think was relevant from this guy's session was that he started to notice that his performance was improving. And I said, what are you feeling? And he said, oh, I'm feeling kind of sad. And I said, isn't that interesting? So pay attention to your feeling of sadness. And as he paid attention to what he was experiencing emotionally, his performance got even better. And that's when he started to connect the dots between how he had been living his life, in a sense, pushing his emotions away and focusing on getting the task done. And that here he was seeing that he was actually able to perform better and his brain was functioning more efficiently when he let himself experience what he was feeling without getting over involved in it, but to allow himself to feel what he was feeling without judgment, without reaction, other than to let himself feel what he was feeling, that in fact improved his brain's ability to perform.
Okay. Can you give perhaps another example of how you've helped people, especially people over 50, in terms of using their mental?
Well, certainly getting people over 50 to remember what it means to breathe what I've found is that as we get older, we start forgetting what it means to pay attention to respiration and breathe normally. And we tend to hyperventilate, or we end up breathing mostly through our mouths and not through our nose. And what happens is that we increase sympathetic arousal, or the fight-flight response, every time we inhale through our mouth. So what I've been coaching people to do is to really start paying attention to their respiration, both in terms of whether they're breathing through their mouth or their nose, and also thinking about how many breaths per minute people are taking. Because there actually is a lot of research on what it means to breathe normally and what that translates into in terms of the number of breaths per minute, which is actually around 6.
Okay. So from what I've learned, it's about 6, and it's also deeper breaths from the diaphragm as opposed to up high, just in the nasal area.
And what happens is that when people breathe through their mouth, they almost always expand their upper chest before their diaphragm.
Okay.
So one of the things is to start getting people to start thinking about the first part of their body that moves when they breathe is their bottom rib.
Okay.
And that when you think about your bottom rib being the first part to move, and the fact that your ribs are moving away from each other sideways, you get that experience of the bellows opening up and the air coming in, filling up your chest from the bottom up rather than from the top down. And when you do that, you're actually stimulating parasympathetic activity, which is the cool and calm response, and not the fight-flight response, which dumps adrenaline into your blood.
And so when we're constantly in a period of stress, chronic stress is not good for you. I mean,
I certainly agree with you. And if you're constantly dumping adrenaline into your bloodstream, then you're basically walking around in a constant state of hyperventilation or overactivation, which is going to decrease the amount of frontal lobe activity in your brain and make you basically functioning out of the limbic system, which is essentially the structure of a crocodile. Okay. So instead of you, the human being, the smart monkey running the show, you've got a crocodile running your life.
Well, what would be some symptoms that someone may have, or that would indicate that this is the way they've been living, and how would they know that? Would they manifest themselves before they would come to you?
Well, certainly, if people are feeling like they've got any kind of symptoms related to anxiety or panic, that would be something they would certainly want to do something about, and that brings a lot of people into our practice when they're experiencing any kind of chronic anxiety or agitation, or even having panic attacks. Other people I've seen, when they start noticing that they can't remember as well, or they can't process information as quickly or as completely, where they find themselves acting more impulsively, where it feels like they're not able to stop and think about what they're doing. They're kind of working on an automatic response, or they're functioning on autopilot. That can be a very often reported experience that people have that brings them to us for help.
Okay. So if someone does come to you with some of those symptoms, how would you normally go about working with them?
Well, we certainly do. We do a comprehensive assessment, both physiological, neurophysiological, and neuropsychological, if it turns out that the people are experiencing neuropsychological symptoms like memory issues or cognitive functions being off, we'll do some neuropsychological testing. But we certainly use also something called a quantitative EEG, where we can measure 19 channels of someone's brain activity by putting a little cap on their head that has a number of sensors, and we can measure the electrical activity from all of those sensors over a period of 6 or 7 minutes, with people having their eyes open, and then 6 or 7 minutes with their eyes closed. And we can compare that information against a normative database of hundreds and hundreds of people, where we can see how that individual's brain activity compares to a sample of people who were carefully screened to not have any kind of early childhood problems or significant head trauma or anything like that. And we can then compare them against that normative sample and see how their brain activity differs. And we can then suggest that those kinds of differences that people see in their brain activity can be related to challenges that they're seeing in their thinking and their functioning and their emotional responses, and even in their physical responses.
Okay.
And then we can develop a training program exactly the same as what you would find when you go to the gym, where you would be told, well, use this machine this way and do 15 reps of this at this weight and do it this many times a week. We can do the same kind of training protocol, except what we're doing is learning how to modify your brainwave activity.
Is this something that is only done in your offices, or is this things that they can also do at home?
Oh, we definitely encourage people to do the training at home. We buy equipment for people and teach them how to use it at home. We can also remotely control the equipment that they have at home over the internet. So we can actually show people how to do the neurofeedback training, in their home, and we can then extract the session by session data that they acquire by doing the sessions. We can then take that data into our own software, and we can trend out their performance and show them how they're doing session by session. And if there needs to be a modification to the protocol, we can download that into their computer, and they don't have to come to the office so much.
Okay. And what type of outcomes do people look for, and what do they achieve from their sessions?
Well, certainly getting the crocodile out of the driver's seat is one of the most important pieces of our approach. We want somebody to get their full brain back and available to them, so that they're able to make better decisions, remember better, plan better, organize themselves better, and also to notice that they are feeling more of their emotional life, that they're not as shut down or as stuck in a rut of repetitive behavior, but they're able to actually enjoy being in the moment, like you said, that they can actually appreciate what it's like to be in the here and now and be in their life and relate to other people and feel more connected.
Okay. Now, any type of new technology or thing that's not as widespread as knowledge usually has some misconceptions that keep people from venturing to try it. They're a little cautious.
Yeah.
So what are some of the misconceptions people may have about your training, and how do you help them overcome them?
Well, I think that's a great question, because I think that because we as a culture have been so conditioned to think about medical and psychological problems as being something that have to do with biochemistry alone, and that what we need to do is alter the chemical imbalances that are creating the problem. And when we find out that, in fact, that really isn't the case, the chemical imbalances are not an accurate way of describing the source of the problems that people are having, and that we can influence our biochemistry by altering the pattern of electrical activity in our brain, because every neuron, every brain cell in our brain is both an electrical and a chemical system. And the chemical activity affects the electricity, and the electricity directly affects the chemistry. So the pharmaceutical industry has been based on going the chemical route, but there has been over 100 years of data showing that you can alter the electrical activity through biofeedback training. And biofeedback itself has been approved as a treatment by Medicare for well over 60 years. So it's just something that's not been promoted nearly as much. And more than that, people just need to be open to the idea of doing something other than taking a pill, and that they really can affect change in their body and their mind by doing things that don't involve taking medication. And that's a hard shift to make for a lot of people, because we've been conditioned over the years to basically think that when you go to the doctor, it's because there's something wrong, and that when you get there, you're gonna get a pill.
Yeah, the other thing is the mind shift that says my thoughts affect the chemistry in my body, which can actually be producing good results or bad results.
Right.
And I've got to own that, and that I then, once I get the skills, I can change that, which means I'm in control of my own health and wellness.
And Phil, I just wrote something about that in one of the dementia forums, because I'm coming to see that it really is a very significant challenge for people to start to think about this issue of not being able to depend on the doctor to have the answer. And that in a situation now where we've got systemic problems like neurodegenerative disorders like dementia, like Alzheimer's, and frontotemporal dementia, and Lewy body dementia, and Parkinson's disease, and ALS. I mean, these are profoundly different kinds of disorders that have been prominent in the culture over the last decades, and that now we're seeing problems that really are systemic problems. They're not specific disease entities, like polio, like a virus, and we develop an antibody or a vaccine, and then we're okay. And now we've got systemic problems that don't really align themselves with that kind of treatment model. And it's very challenging for people to go, oh, wait a minute, maybe the doctors don't have the answer. And that's a pretty scary thought for a lot of people, because then it's like, well, wait a minute, what is the answer? And where do I go for the answer? And that's a very big challenge to be able to face that level of unknown. And so it's hard for people to make the switch and shift to not just taking a pill.
So, Marvin, based on your years of experience, what's the biggest lesson learned that you can have about this shift in wellness and neurofeedback and biofeedback training? What's the biggest lesson learned that would help people make that shift so they can take the action they need to take control of their own health and fitness?
Well, I think it's now the idea that your body and your mind are related to each other, and that there really is a connection between the way you think and the way you feel, and the way you feel has some very real direct impact on the way you can think and the way you can function cognitively. And the more you can start to understand and appreciate that your mind and your body really aren't separate, then you can start to feel a certain sense of agency or control, or the word in psychology is internal locus of control, that you can feel empowered to take ownership of your own health and well-being by the way you think, and also to start realizing that the behaviors that you engage in can either be taking you toward an increased sense of health and well-being or take you away. And that Norman Vincent Peale wasn't wrong. That how you think, the power of positive thinking really does matter.
Right. Well, that's some pretty powerful information. If people want to learn more about QuietMIND Foundation or to contact you, where would you have them go?
Our website is www.quietmindfdn.org. That's the word quiet and the word mind, and then the letters F as in Frank, D as in dog, N as in Nancy.org. We are located in Philadelphia, outside of Philadelphia, and we also have an office in New York City. And our medical director is in New York City, Dr. Halper. And we're on the internet a lot. We are on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, QuietMIND Foundation, and I post a lot of information there. We also are conducting clinical trials that people might be interested in, and they're on the website to take a look at. And they're clinical trials for non-invasive, non-drug technologies involving infrared light at this point for people with early memory concerns, not with the diagnosis of Alzheimer's, but people who are feeling like they might be slipping with their memory. And we've been using technology to assess whether we can influence that. And also people with Parkinson's. And we've been using infrared light to train people to improve their brain functioning using infrared light. So those are the key things. Yeah. So, and our phone number is 610-940-0488, and we can be reached pretty much anytime.
And I want to thank you, Marvin, for sharing the information. If you go to the website, there's a lot of really good information. I do suggest people educate themselves and learn, because the more they learn, the more comfortable they're going to feel about seeking out people that can help them with issues that perhaps they thought they couldn't get help with. And again, what you're doing with the QuietMIND Foundation is outstanding. And again, I want to thank you for sharing your information today.
Thank you, Phil. It's been a pleasure.
Great. Have a great day.
Take care.
You've been listening to Never Too Late for Fitness Radio, hosted by Phil Ferris. To learn more about the guests or resources on our show today, or to listen to past episodes, go to nevertoolateforfitness.com.